Well, let's talk some more about this. With me is Dave Garratt. He's Chief Executive of Refugee Action. That's an organisation that provides support to refugees here in the UK. And Jeff Crisp joins us from Washington. He's from the advocacy group Refugees International. Jeff Crisp, this is basically happening because the world is not doing enough to stop the conflicts or the starvation and the problems that push people out.
Yes, I think the very high number of refugees that we see at the moment, and which was reported on this morning by the United Nations, it's a result of a number of different factors. We have some long-standing conflicts, such as those in Afghanistan, Iraq and Somalia, which are not getting any better, which is preventing refugees from going back to their own country. And at the same time, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a spate of new emergencies, countries such as Ivory Coast, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Syria. And now, of course, we're very worried about the situation in both Ukraine and northern Nigeria. So the numbers seem set to rise. And in fact, the 51 million figure given by the United Nations is actually a slightly out-of-date figure. That's the figure for the end of 2013. And of course, we've seen very significant exodus of refugees from Syria over the past 6 months. So the number is very high, but it's continuing to rise.
Dave, and that number of people are continuing to rise, that frankly, it's the poorer countries of the world that end up supporting them. Most refugees are supported, 85% I think of refugees are supported in poorer countries.
That's right, and it's getting worse. It's now about 85% of people are supported in developing nations and only 15 in the developed world. And it used to be 70-30, so the developed world just isn't doing enough to take care of this global refugee crisis. In the UK, for example, we have a resettlement programme that has an ambition to resettle only 750 people a year. Now that compares quite badly actually to other nations, Australia.
Globally, 750 globally from wherever they may be,
wherever
not just
they are,
Syria.
we take 750 people a year, and we have a small programme around Syrian refugees, which has ambitions for sort of a few hundred, but so far since March has only managed to resettle about 24 people. So I think this report is a real wake-up call for Western governments, but for the UK in particular, to honour what has been a proud tradition of welcoming refugees to the UK. But,
I think, what are the, for example, give us the Syrian figures. I mean, for the UK, they're pretty low, aren't they?
Well, in terms of a programme, 24 people. In terms of what we call spontaneous arrivals, people that get here under their own steam, well, actually, it's very difficult to get from Syria to the UK, so we're only talking a few thousand.
But applications, it's about 3,000, I think, and I think
right,
Sweden in the EU has more than any other in terms of new applications.
Sweden has more in terms of just spontaneous arrival new applications. Then, of course, a country like Germany has pledged to bring in 20,000 people from Somalia. But these are the figures we need to see the UK government starting to have ambitions around.
Jeff Crisp, though, but the numbers are still very small. I mean, can Western nations like the UK do more to help the refugees of the world other than just receiving them within their own countries? What should they be doing?
Well, I think they have a number of responsibilities. One is certainly to admit more asylum seekers and more refugees through resettlement programmes such as those that were just described. They have a responsibility to support humanitarian agencies in their efforts to provide immediate relief and life-saving assistance to refugees. But perhaps most of all, as the High Commissioner for Refugees just hinted, they have a political responsibility to try and use diplomacy to bring conflicts to an end. And as we've seen in the case of Syria, the Security Council is completely paralysed, even on the issue of getting cross-border assistance from neighbouring countries into the people who are in need in Syria. So we are at a very grave moment in the international community's political history, and the system of global governance that was set up at the end of the Second World War simply isn't functioning the way it was intended to do.
And very quickly, Dave, I mean, what happens to refugees generally, not just here in the UK? I mean, they are often excluded from society, even in the countries where they go to in large numbers.
It can be very difficult to build a new life in a new country, but what we see refugees being is some of the most resilient, powerful, amazing people who really struggle and really strive to build a new life. So we should be proud to welcome refugees to the UK.
Thanks very much indeed, Dave Garratt and Jeff Crisp in Washington. Thank you both, gentlemen.